I'm back with Ricochet's favorite statue head model to explain the final chunk of the Ricochet settings. So we'll need a brand new Ricochet, and I'd like to set this to object mode. The object will be the head, hide the head, and in fact, let's even fully hide the head. And we've got this line bouncing around. Let's even go and create the matrix object. So now there are 10 different matrix clones, each starting a brand new line that's bouncing around a couple times. The new things we're going to be talking about are all found within the Spline tab. First of all, we've got close spline. It's pretty straightforward. You click close spline and it's going to take the last point and connect it with the first point of any given segment. So that's just in case you need to close a spline or create some sort of loop. It's important to note that that does not in any way detect collisions. It's just going to do a direct connection. Next up is reverse. It's pretty straightforward, but as a way of demonstration, I'll feed this into a sweep, feed in an end side, give it a couple extra segments, and give it a thickness of 5. Now we'll see those spikes coming out. Of course, Ricochet can compensate for that with a bevel. And now we get all these different lines. If the sweep has an end scale of 0, then now it's going from full thickness down to 0 thickness. And of course, inside a Ricochet, under spline, if I say reverse, it goes backward, it flips it around. So the start becomes the end becomes the start, and transitions between the two. All right, let's turn that off. We don't need to sweep anymore. Thank you for your service. And back to the Ricochet. We'll skip over explode segments and show that last, but now let's show enable spline types. Now, you should be familiar with the spline types just from general cinema. If we go and turn this on, we are now going to subdivide this line and get some different effects from it. Now, an obvious use case for this is changing it to one of these other modes like a B-spline, and it's going to round out our spline, and we get these nice curves everywhere. And it's subdivided by the intermediate points, so every 5 degrees it creates a subdivision. And we can do the different modes like cubic and a Kima, and those are the main ones. I don't think Bezier really does. Actually, no, Bezier does make some nice curves naturally. So those are some nice ways to be able to get curves right out of Ricochet. Of course, these curves are in no way going to be bouncing off things. These are just curves from the points that got generated. Having said that, there is a pretty cool thing we can do, and I'll just sneak it in here as an explanation. If we turn on any mode, but then change this to something like subdivided, then now every 5 units, it's creating a subdivision. We can't really see that, but we can see it if we deform it in some way. So I shall make a random effector and set this to deform points. And if I drop that as a child of the Ricochet, it's going to deform all of the points. It's a little strong right now, but inside that random, let's pull back the strength, and you'll see that any given straight line is now made of a bunch of lines, and we can actually add some imperfections to it and really kind of jitter them around. That opens up like a lot of opportunities. And let me just show you here, even with this really weak strength to randomize, we can fill out the volume of this a bunch by underneath the spline. Let's keep on shrinking this maximum length, which is just more and more and more subdivisions. So you want to be careful not to go down to 0. It's going to go to 0.01. That's way too many points. So I'll jump that back up to 1. You can now see that's created all this jittering, and it really fills it out. If I were to grab that random and pull back all the way, like look how much volume, how easily we can see through that object. And as I increase it, look at how many splines are filling up that space. So I will have different tutorials about using these techniques to help create cobwebs and create electricity effects. And they are really fun. I was really impressed with what we're able to get away with. But this is a quick demonstration of that, how we can deform this and get some extra volume and detail and just fuzziness. So I don't need to see that now. I'll turn it off just to have it not have any effect and say .deform, just so I don't forget what that one does. Now we don't need to currently subdivide, so I'll turn that back off. And let's talk about the last big feature of Ricochet, and that is the explode segments. Right now, if I take Ricochet and hit delete, we're going to get a single spline back. It's a single spline with 10 segments because, the matrix of 10. Let's hit undo, and instead click on explode segments, and now hit C to make it editable, and now it'll actually return a null object, and inside of that are 10 separate spline segments. So this will actually go through every single spline, starting from the first matrix to the second matrix to the third. That's the order that these are appearing. So I'll undo that. Now this null containing splines is the same structure that like a text object will return when you make a text spline editable. So a bunch of objects in Cinema actually see this structure inherently, and so it's actually very usable throughout all of different Cinema. Important to note that when you do explode something out into separate segments that it's more objects. Cinema doesn't like a lot of objects, so technically it's a little bit slower, but it does open up a lot of opportunities. And I will show you some of those right now. Now, unfortunately, well, it's good in general, but right now, if I have Ricochet selected, it's highlighting it and it highlights it in orange, which means I can't show you any colors on it. So I will lock these parameters and then deselect Ricochet so I can actually see the spline, which is not highlighted, so it's just black. Now, if we go into colorize, that we've exploded the segments, every segment can be given a different color. So clicking on random, I am now getting a completely random color from every single segment. And we can click this randomize button and change the seed, and I get any color from the rainbow appearing on here, anywhere from black to white and every rainbow color in between. Next, we can change colorize to grayscale, and it's going to create random colors assigned. Again, we can hit the random button and get different ones, anywhere from white to black. And you know, in third-party renderers, they often like to take these types of colors and then you can map them onto something else. So also very powerful. The third method that we have is colorize from matrix. And I really love this one. When I turn this on, you're going to see that we're getting this teal color, and that's because the matrix is teal. Turning off the lock button, so I unlock my attribute manager. I can select the matrix, and because kind of the color of the rocket lasso spline here is teal, and that's the color of the icon as well, that's the color we set it by default. So you can see here under the matrix transform that that's the color. Let's set this down to something like black so that we can start from a blank palette. And now let's colorize this somehow. So I'm thinking, let's create a plane effector. Drop that as a child just to be organized. And I don't want this to be changing the position, so I'll turn that off. And now it's just affecting the field color. Currently, it's turned it entirely white. If we go into the fall off, I could assign, let's say, a random field and say, hey, I don't want it to affect the values, but I do want to affect the color. And as soon as I do, you can see that this is randomly colorized them. So with that in mind, let's put an animation speed in here. I'll type in 55. Actually, that's a little slow, so I'll type in 200-ish. And then hit play, and now you can see these are animated over time. And it's feeding that through into the display color of those individual splines. Very powerful. There are a lot of opportunities opened up now by unlocking this feature. So something we might do is create a step. Let's grab a step field layer. And now the basics are, let's make sure it's affecting color. It's going to step through, and there's a basic color here, but I could put that to, I think, white. You'll see it go from black up to white. But even more fun is saying, here's a gradient. So now it's mapping from black to white on the gradient. But if I say load preset, we can load any of these cinema presets, and let's do the full range of colors. And now we get this crazy rainbow of all these different colors, all layered up inside of the Ricochet. I can say, hey, create, actually inside the matrix rather. Let's add more lines and look at all these crazy colors that we can layer up and fill this object. And everything can layer from there. It's got all the options you'd expect from MoGraph. So again, creating a random field that could create random colors and set that to normal. Where is it? Normal, and then just have this partially be on top of it. Let's give that some animation speed again, hit play, and that will be running colors on top of it. This could be overlaying those colors that were being generated. There are so many opportunities to create just cool effects. Add on a solid, and the solid can be set to add mode and set that to also affect colors. And let's drag in something, and now you can see everything's getting colorized into this red range. We got a lot of opportunities here. That's really cool. A problem though is that vanilla cinema doesn't have, as far as I know, a way of rendering these out that we can actually see them with different colors. You can render splines with hair, but there's no option to colorize them. And you can render splines with Sketch and Toon, which is, the two ways of rendering these splines out directly in cinema. However, there's no way of it taking the color of the object. Third-party renderers can. So let's set that up really quickly. I have Redshift handy, so we'll use that one, but should work with all third-party renderers. So I would like to color, well, they're already colorized, so we want this to render somehow. So for Redshift, if I right-click on my spline, I can say, hey, Redshift object tag, say there's a curve, add a hair strand on there. I'll say 0.1 because right now I think 1 would be a little thick. And then create a Redshift material. I've actually got one handy already. I'll just drop that on. Open up the Redshift render view. Before I hit go on the render view though, it's not going to render anything. And that is because, keep in mind, if we make this editable, it's a null and a series of splines underneath it. And those splines will not get this tag applied to them. And it's just a thing where the Redshift tags don't filter down to the children. So you'll see here we added in an option, tag to segments. So if I drag a tag in there, it'll actually duplicate this tag onto every individual segment. If I make this editable, you'll see that that tag is now copied to each of the children. So with that in mind, now it is actually getting that filtered through. So now if I were to hit render in my render view, we will now see these lines get rendered, but there's no color. And that's because inside of my material, I need to feed it that color information. So in this case, I can search for the word user, and there is our color user data. Drag that over. And this is colorizing the display color. So attribute name, object, display color, and that can be fed into any property now. And I will feed that into the overall emission color. And I've already activated the emission color. So it's got emission of 1. Close that. And now already you can see it's refreshed and all the different lines, colors are represented right there in the viewport. We can go and spin around. It's going to render incredibly quickly. Zoom up. Those are the colors. And just for fun, let's turn back on our subdivisions, our spline type. And it's going to subdivide that a bunch and then reactivate our random deform, and it'll explode those lines out. And we get all these different colors filling out this entire space. This opens up so many cool rendering possibilities. Adding variation on top of the colors just really makes renders pop, and sometimes it's an absolute must. Rendering different like electricities or threads or webs or wrapping. You can think of all the different ways that this might combine. And the ability for third-party renderers to render splines directly is really fast. You can get very quick renders out because splines just render quickly. And I'll have additional videos and tutorials. Keep an eye out for my electricity tutorial and the web one. They're really neat, and you can see some of those examples in the quick start as well. But that should pretty much cover this. You see all the extra powers that are unlocked by playing with our spline types and exploding the segments. And just in general, I'm so excited that Ricochet is getting out there into the world and that everybody gets to play with it. I'm really excited and proud of this one. So if you make anything cool, please send it my way and tag Rocket Lasso on all the different platforms and I'll see it. Thank you so much for watching this video and checking out Ricochet, and I'll see you in another video sometime. Bye-bye.